Good morning and welcome to Coding with Jess, where you get to code along with me while I build a thing. So if you've been around for the last few weeks, you'll know that we're working on Mumbler, which is a decentralized blogging engine. And I'm pretty excited about what we're going to be working on today because there's a lot of complexity in sort of the underlying implementation. And I've been sort of mulling over this new pattern of authentication, which people are starting to call passwordless, and it's like gaining momentum. And anyway, I'm excited to kind of work through that and work through that in the UX of Mumbler. So if this is your first time joining for Coding with Jess, what we're going to do is for the next 2 hours, I'm going to live stream working on this project. I'll be talking out loud the whole time I'm working on it. We'll be like switching over to look at the whiteboard and sketching on the whiteboard. I'll actually bring up my code editor and we'll be typing out some code and stuff. I will try to interact in the chat. So if you do have questions or comments, feel free to drop them in the chat and I'll check that from time to time on the YouTubes. And we'll also work in 25-minute blocks called Pomodoros. So we'll do 25 minutes of work, 5-minute break, 25 minutes of work, 5-minute break, 4 Pomodoros for a combined 2-hour working session on Mumbler. I guess the other thing to note is that this particular repository we'll be working on is public. If you just go to github.com/jessmartin/mumbler, you'll find the repository we'll be working on today. All right, well, glad you're here to work on this with me. And without further ado, let's dive in. For those of you who have coded along with me before, you'll know we're going to use a little Pomodoro app called Tomato 2 by Vojta Rinnick to keep track of where we are. We've got our 25 minutes here. I also keep a text file where I basically keep a running log of work that I'm doing within any individual project. And when I'm sitting down for any working session, I try to make sure to sort of type up my thoughts around what I want to accomplish during that working session. So let me quickly remind you of kind of where we were last time, because it really does have bearing on how we approach the thing today. So last time we wanted to do this really simple thing, which is add a log out button. Well, actually we already had a log out button and I wanted to move it to the proper place. And so like, let me show you what Mumbler looks like today so we can be talking about the same thing. Mumbler.netlify.app. I need to move this to, I realize I need to like buy a domain and move this to a domain, but whatever. So right now we have this Mumbler Netlify app. We moved the logout button to the right spot, but in the process of moving the logout button, I got to talking with some of the folks at Fission who are behind the Web Native library. Again, this is using Fission's Web Native to wrap a file system around an IPFS node. If none of those words make sense to you, don't worry about it, because in just a minute we'll be switching over to the whiteboard to like talk through the architecture of how this thing works in order for me to get my head straight around how authentication works. So we were just moving this logout button, which had been like right up here. We just moved it over to here, and in the process some folks at the Fission team were like, logout is not really what you think it is, which led me down the path of what the heck is logout and thinking through how that works in this new passwordless auth or key-based auth environment. And what I realized in that process, had some good conversations, which I documented down here, and I kind of spelled out my thinking after talking with folks at Fission. Wrote it down in my document to kind of capture it in my mind. And then today we'll be kind of talking through the ramifications. So what I arrived at in kind of working through this is, well, let's jump over to like talk about how auth works in this passwordless auth world. So I've already kind of prepped a bit of a diagram that we can work through here on the board for the architecture. But and I should reiterate that this particular architecture is still fairly new to me. Like, I'm working through the ramifications of it. I didn't know anything about it like 6 weeks ago, so I'm kind of, yeah. If there are things that are wrong up here, please let me know, and I can like go and update my mental model of the way this works. But here's the way to think about sort of this decentralized blogging platform and the architecture of these systems. Normally you would have like client server, right? Where you have a client and a server, and they client requests hit the server decides whether things are possible or not based on some authentication credentials that the client has provided, and then it goes out to third-party services. If you read my most recent newsletter, I talked about this model a little bit, and you can find that most recent newsletter on jessmart.in. But this ain't that. We're in a different world. It is not client server third-party services. Instead, we basically have clients. Everything's a client, or conversely, you could think of as everything's a server. Basically, it's one giant distributed system. And so authentication is handled via keys as opposed to passwords. Now, the simple concept, in fact, you can think of keys in a lot of the physical analogies that work with real physical keys in the real world actually cross apply over to keys in this passwordless based auth world. And you can almost think of them as existing in a certain place, having the ability to unlock certain things, and the ability, and also the ability to, or that they do not work with certain things as well. So here we go. Think of your browser as one of these clients in this giant distributed system. So inside my browser, there is a, and I know I'm getting these terms wrong, but there is a secure enclave, which basically means safe place to store these credentials, which are, well, to store your keys. It's like a keychain that exists inside your browser. It's secure in some fancy cryptographic sense in that like the keys are not exportable. So like if someone busted into your laptop, they couldn't like get the key out of that. So they tell me. I am not a encryption expert, but what I do understand is this, what's happening in Mumbler and with the Fission and the web native stack is that Fission has this library, which I don't know where to represent it. The library actually operates from within your browser. So there's, where do you represent it? Well, it's loaded by the Mumbler application, but in general, what the Fission web native library does, web native, is it wraps a standard node on the IPFS network where you can, an IPFS like giant, you never heard of that? It's like a giant decentralized S3, a file store where you can store any kind of file you want. There are certain guarantees around the file continuing to exist and all that kind of stuff. But this stands for Interplanetary File System. Go to look it up on ipfs.io if you've never heard of it. But anyway, this is giant decentralized S3. What web native does is it wraps an IPFS node, which is basically this giant place where you can like store files publicly. It wraps this in a bunch of file system like handlers. So it provides support for things like directories, storing files in directories, and then very, very importantly, it also handles encrypted or private files. And so everything web native stores in the private version part of the file system is actually encrypted. And what is it encrypted with? Well, it is encrypted with this key that belongs to the user. And now I've deliberately represented this IndexedDB secure enclave as separate from the Mumbler application, right? So this lives in your browser, but it is not scoped to the application, at least as far as I understand. So what happens, what you end up with in this world is you end up with a file system that lives in IPFS that belongs to the user, that the user alone has the key to be able to decrypt. And that's why I wrote decrypt here. They can, so there's my user file system over here in IPFS land, and then I've got the key. So we started this conversation with what is log in or log out? What does this even mean in this world? And the simple way to think about it is Mumbler is an application that I would like to use to write to my file system. Specifically, in the case of Mumbler, I want to write markdown files because this is a blogging front end that allows me to write these markdown files over to, let's draw ourselves a little markdown file here. Doop, 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 doop. We want to write these markdown files to a file system, but Mumbler doesn't own the file system. So in the case of a traditional Web 2 application where you were actually using S3, Mumbler would have the credentials to an S3 bucket that would be owned by Mumbler. And so as a user, when I come in, I create a username and a password and account with Mumbler, and then I rely on Mumbler to manage my files on my behalf in this S3 bucket. But in reality, they're Mumbler's files. If Mumbler goes away, blows up overnight, loses the keys to S3, whatever, my files are gone. Well, they're buried in an S3 bucket that I cannot get to. And plus I have to like go to Mumbler to ask for access to all this stuff. In this world, this Web3 decentralized, whatever world you might want to call it, the user in reality owns that file system, and then Mumbler asks for permission to be able to write to my file system. So back to the idea of log in and log out. What I realized in thinking through it over the last week and talking with folks at Fission is that a stronger analogy than log in, log out, at least within the context of Mumbler, is does Mumbler have access? Is it connected to a file system that it can write to? The way that works, just to get a little bit technical, is Mumbler has its own keys or its own sort of access permissions to file system. And what we're going to do in the auth loop is we're going to delegate some permissions to Mumbler from my primary key to specific places in my file system. We're going to say, hey, Mumbler, you can write to /posts/ I think it's actually public /posts is the thing that we ask for permission to. And actually, now that I think about it, I think we actually ask for a private permission as well, which we don't necessarily need. So we could scope back. So we basically say, Mumbler will ask me, the user, if I want to delegate or for permission to access public posts. And if I say yes, we create another key that belongs to Mumbler that has delegated permissions to access just this part of my overall file system in IPFS. And so, again, delegated permissions, that sounds really fancy. The real question, I think, the real way to communicate this to the user is Mumbler connected to a file system, or is it not connected to a file system? Which means, does it have the right permissions to that file system? And so I think what we need to do today is change the UX around the application. And this is where I started talking here. We want to replace the login and the log out with connect file system and disconnect file system. We might also want to have some sort of representation in the UI that a file system is connected. So maybe like in the top right, instead of that log out button that I was showing you a second ago, maybe we actually want to represent, you know, I don't know, like a green circle or something. It's like, you are connected to this file system right now, or you're not connected to a file system. And yeah, so again, to recap, permissions are granted to Mumbler by the user to access the user's file system, which is a much more similar concept to connect, disconnect than log in, log out. So here's what we're going to try and accomplish today. When you first go to mumbler.com, if the user does not have permission, it should show some option to connect the file system, to connect a file system. I'm tempted to, we were messing around last time, if you watched the last session, where the UI was flickering during this moment we were trying to detect whether there was a file system or not. So we may just use the, like, leave the whole interface here and like disable the interface until you like connect a file system. I don't know exactly how we'll represent this. I have some ideas. But then when you're going to mumbler.com, if the user already has permission, it should show the correct UI immediately. So in other words, they shouldn't have to click connect file system again if the Mumbler already has the delegated access to that file system. So yeah, we're going to have to work through how to do this. There's going to be some messing with our current code is kind of a spaghetti mess right now. Not a spaghetti mess. It's just like one flat file with a whole bunch of functions in it. We ran into some problems with like await and async requests here because there is an async callback cycle around the auth loop. And then, yeah, I was just saying it might be fun to have an actual Mumbler development blog, because I would have posted this to it throughout the week, and we could build that blog on Mumbler about Mumbler, which would be super meta and super awesome. All right, so without further ado, if you have any other questions about that, if that was not a clear explanation, feel free to drop them into the chat, and I will see about responding to those. Ooh, yuck. I don't like the way that doesn't have, I need to add some side margin on the top level container so it doesn't squish like that when you zoom in, but whatever. We'll come back to that. Okay, so we are on a branch called login button. First off, let's go to that PR. Big thanks to Luis Martinez, who was chatting with us last time and actually left some comments on how we could avoid the flicker when we were redirecting the Fission lobby. It's awesome to get to interact with folks and then have them comment on PRs after the session's over. So thanks, Luis, if you're listening to that or listening to this, and feel free to keep engaging in that way, and I'll try to be more responsive on GitHub as well. All right, so the reason I pulled that up as well was not only to thank Luis, but to show, I was just going to show a quick diff of like what's changed in this particular, oh, that's interesting. Oh, right, because we said we created a login with Fission button. So it looks like a lot has changed if I'm just scrolling quickly through this. The reality is that not as much has changed as it looks like. We added a log in button that would take over the interface when you're first logging in. I actually think there's a deploy preview I could show an example of real quick. Let me switch over to that and see if I can bring up this deploy preview. Yes. So here's what we were going with, this login with Fission with like the actual logo here. Again, I think this is the wrong paradigm, user experience paradigm, and we should switch to like a connect disconnect model. And so we're gonna blow a lot of this away. And so it might actually make sense to just like nuke this branch entirely, close the PR, and say, hey, we're moving to like a different model. The only other thing that we were commenting on here is yeah, so the reason there's so many changes over here on the right is because we basically moved everything under a single await. So as I'm looking at this, I don't think there's really anything worth salvaging from this approach, but I am gonna like update the PR with kind of what we were just thinking about, or what we were just discussing before I close the PR, just as a good habit of leaving a nice trail behind us of what we did. After diving into the concept, or after diving into the idea of log in and log out, realized that a stronger analogy in this passwordless key-based auth world. Now let's cut this sentence short. Realized that it was a flawed analogy. Period. In this passwordless key-based auth world, a better analogy, at least for Mumbler, is connected or disconnected from a file system. I'm going to close this PR, as we will also want to rethink the UX in light of this change. We'll open a new PR shortly. Should drop a link to this video at some point there, but all right, comment on that. We're gonna go ahead and close the pull request. Okay, was interesting. Learned some good stuff there. Oh, one thing I should mention that I thought that I thought of as I was writing that is I talked about log in. What does log out mean? Log out is actually really simple. All it means is that I am revoking the privileges that I've given this particular key. And so what happens literally, like from a cryptographic standpoint, this delegating stuff to the file system basically means that this key has read and write privilege to the SID content ID of this particular thing, so it can like make changes to that file system. When you break the delegation, I think what happens is it actually changes this. This is actually something I'm gonna have to ask about. I think it changes this SID, or like advances this particular directory forward and removes the ability to write here. But I got into this conversation about read and write. I think Mumbler's key will always be able to read the old versions of those files because, yeah, obviously there's some complexity here that I don't completely understand now that I'm trying to explain it. But the important thing is that the delegated permissions given to Mumbler for this file system, it no longer has the ability to write to it. It can read the old versions that I delegated to from the past, but it cannot write new stuff to it, and it can't read new files created after this point in time. So that's why I was saying this is more accurately thought of as disconnected from the file system. So, all right, back here. Here we go. Okay, so this was the deploy preview. We no longer need that since that PR is closed. This is the actual deployed version. Let's go ahead, jump back to main, see what branches we have out here. And we're gonna also delete the branch locally. So get branch capital D because I'm not gonna integrate those changes. All right. Oh, I should delete the branch over here too. Pull requests, closed. We can always restore it right there. So good practice to just keep these things cleaned up. Man, something else I really want to do is work on this README. I'm going to go write that down because improve the README. And we also mentioned by a real domain, a custom domain name for Mumbler. And deploy there. I actually did this just yesterday for another website, so it does not take that long. Just need to do it. Okay, so great. Another advantage of having one of these notes that we can kind of capture our thinking over time is we can make sure that we get stuff out of our head and into that notebook. Okay, so open VS Code. And let's run, I'm trying to remember, is it run default? Run dev, that's right. I was playing with Svelte yesterday for the first time, which also runs on Vite, which, by the way, apologize for pronouncing this as Vite for so long. It is Vite. Svelte is pretty nice, and Vite has been pretty great too. Okay, so we've got our main thing with login. Let me see, localhost 3000. Yes, so here's the redirection that I was just discussing in case you haven't seen this before. Allow Mumbler access to the following for about 1 month. Jess Martin Mumbler application folder, posts in my private file system, posts in my public file system. So that's what I was just mentioning over here, that we actually do give access to public/posts and actually also ask for permission for private/posts, which is really not necessary to do, but we'll do it anyway. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit yes here. I'll load my file system, bring me back here, and now I'm technically connected. So we could start, the simple thing to start with here is let's get the styling nailed on this log out button, turn this into a disconnect button and a like you are connected. And then we'll figure out how we don't initiate, yeah, how we recognize whether they're already connected at the beginning. So we don't, and I think one of the things that bothers me that about the current flow is that it automatically forces you to that vision screen. And that vision screen can be disruptive or confusing to the user if they come to Mumbler and they think they're here for Mumbler and then all of a sudden get redirected over to Fission. It does look like an OAuth flow screen, but I think it needs to be something the user initiates. And so let's see if we can figure out how to have the user be the one who initiates that. Okay, let's see. Let's quickly. So the easiest thing we could possibly do here would be just change this to disconnect. But I'm not sure that like graphically carries the right connotations for what we're trying to accomplish here. I think what we want is something like a, let me switch over to the whiteboard again. I think what we want is something like, I don't, file system like this, and then have a color there. And then maybe disconnect, as opposed to making it like a primary button, maybe it's just like a little underline thing afterwards. And I mean, yeah, it's like a status icon, I think, that we're going for here. Might do some, oh, okay. We are at our first Pomodoro break. So again, I'm going to take a 5-minute break. We'll be back in 5 minutes. We have finished our first 25-minute working session in this 2-hour-long block. So we'll be back in 5 for another 25 minutes. Yeah. See you guys in just a few minutes. Starting the break now. Walking outside. Alrighty, I am back from Pomodoro break. Go ahead and hit start Pomodoro on our next 25-minute work session here. Cool, so I was thinking on the break about how to visually represent this like connected thing. I like this little tagline over here, but it could get cluttered. Okay, so what I'm thinking maybe is having a plug icon, like again, let me swap over to the whiteboard. Something like that's not a plug. I guess it's like this. There we go. That's what's missing. Top of the plug. So something like that, and then we could also have a like. So that's when you're connected. Like we make it green or something like that, and when you're not connected, we could show like a thing like that, and we could use a hover tooltip of like connect when you hover over it. And here's an important thing. I think we want to. One of the things I think we got right on the disconnect and connect. I wonder if the deploy preview is still live. One of the things we got right on that log in log out work that we did last week is we integrated the Fission logo into the interface so that when the user went through the Fission login loop, it wasn't the very first time that they'd ever seen that Fission logo. So I hope it wasn't as confusing as it could be. I would imagine the deploy preview is gone, and yes, it is gone. Actually, it might still be up. Let's go see. It's still there. So yeah, this login with Fission, I think maybe we steal this style after all, and we could basically like you're connected to or disconnected from Fission, which I think, while that's a little bit disingenuous, like it's not actually true that the user is connected or disconnected to Fission. They're connected or disconnected to an IPFS node that is wrapped by the web native library that provides a file system. But I think because the flow is so built around this sort of Fission branded OAuth like flow, I think using basically simplifying it for the end user of like, I'm connected, I'm disconnected to or from the Fission file system, I think might be helpful. So anyway, I think that's what we'll do. For right now, I don't want to spend time. I am not amazing at Figma, although I love playing with it and building icons and stuff like that. So I'm not going to build the icon right now of the little plug, and I'll like, trust me, it would take me like 20-25 minutes, and you don't want to sit here and watch me fiddle with pixel art in Figma, or maybe you do. But instead, we'll steal this button style. We're going to move it up here in place of this like disconnect. We're going to move that. In fact, I'm probably going to go back to this closed PR and grab some of the code that we used to style that button. And let me see. I'm going to do a unified view just for a second. I really like the split view, but also close that side drawer. So we'll grab some of this code, style up that button, and I'll forget about I won't throw the icon in for now. Maybe I'll use like an emoji as a placeholder. All right. First thing we're going to do is check out a branch, and this is going to be connect, disconnect. Okay, and this is running in localhost right here. Let's scoot that over, bring up VS Code on the right over here. So the content of our button, where's login? Oh, there it is, or log out. I'm going to change this to be connect, disconnect. And for right now, I'll say connect is the value. Weird, I would have thought that would have live reloaded the page. Am I missing something here? I just saved the input. This is running locally. Why does it still say log out? What? Maybe I ran the wrong thing when I ran npm run byte dev here. Nope. It's still running the wrong thing. What are the other options under npm run? Confused. Did I edit the wrong? Oh, you'll notice that there's a dist folder and a source folder. I edited the actual code in the distribution folder, which honestly, I'm not even sure why that exists, because Vite, and anyway, I don't know. Not sure why it's there, but that caused some confusion. So now we'll change this here, and there, that changes it immediately. Awesome. So now over here, close that up. Kind of want to like hide this from, whoops, hide that from VS Code, but that's fine. All right, so then our log out button, whoops, log out button, we want to change to connect, disconnect. That should put it in the right place. It does. And we want to come over here and grab the code that styled up the button before. Let's see. Here it is. Wait, where's disconnect? Connect? There it is. Okay. So, did we change anything else here? Oh, that's right. We straightened up we fixed our subtitle, or realigned the subtitle to the title last time, which I thought was actually helpful. This, oh no, we don't want to display none. We want that font weight, and then there was one other thing that we did in the CSS last time. So it's not the display nones. All right, let's see how that looks. Okay, cool. I don't remember doing that, setting that title weight, but okay. And then we need the logo dark button, or logo dark, which you can grab that file from here as well. View file. How about download this file raw? There we go. All right, we'll save this to documents, code, Mumbler, and I'm pretty sure it just, I can't remember if it sits at the root or goes in source. Let's just try it at the root first and then see if that does it. Yep, cool, it just sits at the root. And right, we had different text in here before, and that's why this thing is not aligned. So I think what we'll do, oh man, yeah. All right, cool. So I think what we'll do this time is we'll represent our icon that I'm gonna go obsess over in Figma at some point. We'll represent that as a capital C for now. And interesting, okay, so this, we need to push this over to like 10 pixels or something? Nope. It's the background position on, oh, not the top background position, this one. Background size, I think it's this. No, negative 100. There we go. Getting closer. Man, I do really love how fast Vite refreshes. It is insanely fast, building insanely fast. Normally I would do this kind of like pushing things around in the inspector, just because it's so much faster, but I'm actually making these changes live to this file. Vite's rebuilding them and forcing a reload in the browser like faster than you can blink. It's pretty nice. One thing I'll do real quick is let's wrap, can't do that. It's the value. Interesting. I do kind of want to set the color of, we'll have it be a C or a D when it's disconnected, and then I'll add the um, little icon later. All right, and now we need to push this over to, oh right, I remember why this didn't work. Because I'm gonna float right, and then margin top. Oh yeah, we don't want that either. Margin top was like 10 pixels before or something. 20, 30, 20, 24, 23. That looks pretty good. And then we'll need to do margin left. Sure, 12 pixels, Copilot says. I'm always amazed at, yeah, it's funny. Copilot's hilarious. Alrighty, cool. We've got our connects to Fission. We are connected to Fission thing. When we click it, it should disconnect. I think it still does. Oh, it doesn't because we have broken the connection with our JavaScript. So down here, log out, I think. Go away, VS Code. There it is. So now we want to select. Man, VS Code has been having some weird problems for me lately. Like I have lost Vim mode. I can't enter. There it goes. And things like catch up and freak out. I'm not sure what causes that exactly. It's still freaking out. I can't escape from Vim mode. Yeah. It's okay. I'm not sure what's going on there. Are we back now? We're back now. Jeez. That was annoying. Sorry, y'all. Connect. The downsides of using an IDE instead of a text editor is that IDEs can fail to respond to you, whereas text editors hardly ever do that. All right, so now when I click this should actually disconnect me. It does. Wait. That's not at all what I expected. All right, now I'm over here. Wait. Oh, right. Yeah, localhost 3000. Sorry, I went to Mumbler. Okay, so, yep. And so now, appropriately, the delegated permissions were gone. And so now when it hit this page, we currently, and this is the problem we were setting out to fix last week, which we have a better idea of how to fix now, is that it forcibly redirected me over to Fission to connect. And so now we're going to do the connect, which should redirect us back to localhost and then show that I'm connected. Awesome. All right, so now let's go ahead and do a single commit here because we have the commit loop working, or connect loop working. Connect to show connected status indicator. I kind of want to make these not so buttony, but I'll tweak styles later. Show connected status indicator when connected. Sure, that. Oh man, gotta push this branch that I just created up, create a link between the two. All right, so we've got that. Now we have, wait, where's our Mumbler? There we go. So now we've got that done. When first going to Mumbler, if the user already has, it should show the correct UI. We might want to add a tooltip. I'm just going to add that as a possibility. Add a tooltip to show connect or disconnect when hovering over the status indicator. Yeah, I just kind of want to make this less prominent in the UI because it's not something that you're going to be doing often. Frankly, you'll be connected most of the time. And so it really should disappear from the UI and only be used in seldom. All right. Whoops. Guess we won't be buying Mumbler.com. It's already owned. When first going to Mumbler.com. So now we're working on when first going to Mumbler.com. If the user does not have permissions, it should show connect file system as an option. Okay. And honestly, that should probably be a more aggressive case. So let's go ahead and disconnect right now. Go to localhost. I don't like that disconnect sequence. So, all right. So already you can see it forces me through the auth flow immediately. And this is what we were trying to fix last time. So this is definitely going to require us to reorganize the code somewhat. And let's walk through the code and the way we have it structured again. And we may also go back over here and look at Luis's comment on where he dropped a code sample here on the last branch, because I think the solution is going to end up being very similar to the solution that Luis suggested over here. Okay, so here's what's happening in the code. Let's walk through it. At the very top, there is this initialize call, which is part of the web native library. And it's basically saying initialize web native. And then when we are initializing it, we're asking for specific permissions. So we're saying this app called Mumbler by Jess Martin would like permission to access the file system, the private posts directory and the public posts directory on behalf of the user. And then we can get some errors during that process. So we need to catch specific errors that could happen. They could get thrown by the library. So the initial insecure context, unsupported browser, probably want to support these. That's why I have to-dos here. Do something, basically show the error to the user and let the user know that we weren't able to connect on their default. This is a debug statement. I'll probably want to, like, if not in production. Actually, let's go ahead and put that in here. To do disable when in production. We'll do something like that in a little bit. And then here is creating a handle for our file system variable. And then this switch statement is iterating over the state variable that we get back from the initialize. And there's basically several things that could happen here. One is the auth has been canceled by the user. So you got redirected to Vision and this seems weird to me. So I see this wn.redirect to lobby. And I think this is the thing we want to delay doing. So redirect to lobby says basically go to the lobby and request the permissions. Okay. Actually, now looking at this, I didn't see this as clearly last time as I see it now when we were working on this last week. But it should be pretty straightforward. We basically don't want to redirect to lobby unless the user initiates this part. So we can basically put this whole... Okay. I still don't understand what canceled by user could possibly mean in this state. I may need to go read the docs for that. Actually, let's do that real quick. Actually, I don't care because this is not the important part of the scenario right now. The two important parts are here. Great success. We can now use the file system. Yes, Copilot, you are correct. So glad you're following along with us here. Let me go ahead and then this is... Huh. Oh, I see. I don't understand the difference between continuation and auth succeeded, but this is a fall through. Notice we don't have a break statement here. So it's basically saying if the state is either auth succeeded or continuation, then great success. We can now use the file system. And then we can take the action of basically switching the button to connect it. Ooh, I like this. Okay, so what we're going to do here is switch the connected button rad. And so let's like slip the logic then. So we'll make it start in a disconnected state, and then we'll swap it to a connected state when you hit this case statement. And then I think what we want to do is, yeah, we just want to take this wn.redirect to lobby out of here, out of this case. Yes. I'm like, I think. Well, let's just try it. Let's see what happens. And we'll put this behind the button of when it's reconnecting, then, or when you're connecting for the first time, redirect to the lobby. Okay, I think I know how to wire this up. The UX is going to be a little awkward at first. Let's start with switching the disconnected status. Actually, let's start by making this disconnected to begin with this fancy D, and we'll change this to red, which will, and then let's comment out redirect to lobby and go back to localhost. And now what we expect is at the very top right, there's a D. Whee! You are not connected, except you are connected. So then here, let's switch the state out. We've already got a console log. Down here, let's grab the disconnect button. Actually, let's just grab this and bring it up here a little higher. And let's stop calling it logout because that's dumb. Connection status. And we're going to need to change that. Aha. Interesting. So we already have our stuff that we will, we'll add an event listener. Cool. I'm seeing how this is going to come together. It's going to be really nice. So now we'll set the value to connected. Actually, just C. I actually think you're right, Copilot. Connected is clearer, but it's cool. We're going to do it this way. And then the other thing we want to do is we want to change the style of color. Man, Copilot, you're so smart. All right, so in this case, refresh. Whoa! Didn't work. Interesting. Huh, that was kind of interesting too. It starts out as black. I mean, it's probably too small for you to see what's happening right there. Steven in the chat says, canceled by the user meaning that they didn't approve the rights the app asked for in the library. And continuation is basically when you come back to the app, i.e. you've been authenticated before. Awesome. So continuation is right. Canceled by the user though, Steven, what is confusing to me is that I don't think at this, well, I guess I can test it. Let's see. So I am disconnected right now. I'm now running initialize. So I think what this means, auth canceled, is that it was canceled in the past, like not recently. Like they, when we went through the loop, the auth loop, at some point in the past, the user canceled it and said, I don't want it to connect, because we haven't redirected to the lobby yet, at least this time around. And so where is this, like, this wn.initialize must be like reading from local, something local, like an IndexedDB record or something on behalf of web native, or on behalf of Mumbler. Like, so it must store the access permissions that we went through before, I think, maybe. So this would be, just to be more accurate, auth canceled by the user in the past, not that the user just now canceled auth. Although if that did happen, the user just now canceled auth, they would hit this. And so this would also, it could be in the past or just now, I think. Yeah. It's a weird, like, little, yeah, anyway. I'll have to like draw a picture of what I mean on the board in a minute. But what's more interesting to me is that connection status does not appear to be updating It also doesn't seem to be throwing any errors that I could see. Let's pop open the console real quick. Oh, it's getting, oh, of course. Okay. Man, let's take a 5-minute break, but I see where the problem is. You can already see, you may already see it as well. Console log redirected to the lobby. Over here, redirected to lobby. So we're not getting to auth succeeded in continuation because you're not connected yet. Oh my gosh. Okay, I have to go try this. All right, so drive authenticated as Jess Martin. What? Okay, confusing. So it says, oh, because goodness gracious, Jess. Okay, I know I'm technically supposed to be taking my Pomodoro break right now, but I'm too excited to like actually get this working. So instead of let's comment out this leave button. When you click the connection status button, we're gonna actually want to be more clever here, but poopy. We don't have access to the state permissions inside this inner function. Man, could pass in state maybe? No, that would be the event function. Junction, what's your function? All right, so I'm gonna have to get smarter about this little async function and the way that this is populated. Because I need these permissions. Wait, where were they? You know, could just take these. Anyway, okay, I'm gonna take a break. We'll come back and get this working. But basically, it is doing the right thing. I just had some logic in here around the click handler. We should be getting redirected to the lobby when we're disconnected, except not. We're not going to redirect to the lobby anymore. We're going to wait for the user to do that. So we're going to do some other stuff to make this UX flow a little cleaner. All right, be back in 5 minutes. Alrighty, this break is dwindling down. So we are now going to start our third Pomodoro of this 2-hour work block. We're now 2 Pomodoros in, 2 left to go. So we got 1 more hour to crank on this together. I was just chatting with Steven in the YouTube chat, so definitely worth reading through that. Steven's on the Fission team and works on web native stuff there, and so great to have him tagging along and offering helpful helpful advice and thoughts. What he was just pointing out is that we probably actually want to pull the permissions out into their own constant, because we actually need them in a couple different places. And so I'm going to pull that object out of here. I meant to say cut. Whoops. And we're going to make this, throw this object into a constant variable. Boop. No, I think we want to pull the inner thing like that. And then we'll use permissions. Delete that to there. That should work. It does refresh appropriately. Okay, so what was going on there a second ago is that we had, when you click this, hey, it works. I was confused. How does that possibly work? This was just saying, that's bizarre. So we're getting an error in here, but it's actually working here. Whatever. I'm going to click and say yes. We'll come back and clean this up in a second. Should redirect back to localhost. All right, now this time, logged in. Boom! It worked. Sweet. Okay, so you saw the green. It went to green. Maybe we should, interesting. The really interesting thing is there was a delay there. So yeah, 2 things. I don't understand why this works. I think if I do that, it gets rid of our problem. It does. We are disconnected, connected. So we need, I guess, what's going on there? That's really weird. Okay. I think a crucial concept just snapped into place for me, which I had not realized before. And this is why I was confusing the heck out of Steven in the chat a second ago. Okay, so what's going on here is this initialize function is actually initializing web native, and web native is going out and making a connection. Now, this brings up a whole bunch of other thoughts around how offline friendly this is and a bunch of other stuff. But the important thing, the reason that I know what's going on here and is, well, here's what's happening. Initialize, when I initialize the web native library, web native is doing 2 things at least, probably a lot more. But the library is opening an iframe within the page to an IPFS node that runs on the lobby that allows me to basically have an embedded IPFS node inside my browser. And then I can write files, read files to that IPFS node and publish to that. And then that IPFS node, just like I drew over here, this node, what I should have drawn as well is that there's all these other peers that exist on the IPFS network that are all connected to each other. So it's this giant decentralized network of peers that are all storing files all over the place. And so when I connect via initialize here, this is actually bringing, creating an IPFS node locally inside my browser that I can then use to participate in the IPFS network. It's doing a second thing as well. It's opening a WebSocket connection to a WebSocket server that Fission hosts. And that WebSocket server is basically a secure channel that can be used in the case of sharing credentials and probably in some other cases as well. The only reason I know that is because I'm working with Fission on a new project or a derivation of this web native library, an improvement of the web native library that we're calling AOL, which Stephen and I were just chatting about. But the important thing about that is that apps will own their own file system and own their own login process, and Fission won't be inserting themselves in it. And so we had to kind of like walk through what are all the things that Fission is currently providing for the application that the application would have to provide for itself if we didn't use the Fission infrastructure. So I say all that. How did I get all that out of what happens here? So when I refresh the page, which I'm going to do right now, Command R, you'll see that there's a red D there for a second, and then it switches to a green C. And what's happening is we're going through this initialized state, setting up that IPFS node, establishing a WebSocket connection, and then once we've got all that, initialize completes, and we get to this next step where we go through the switch statement. We figure out what state just happened, and this is where I was confusing Stephen, is because I was saying, well, this auth could have happened in the past. Where is this state coming from? I was wrong. Every single time it is going through this web native initialization, we get back a state variable. It's based on the auth, based on a like connection status that we have to Fission. So the connected disconnected is actually not such a bad sort of paradigm, user experience paradigm, because that's literally what's happening. So we have this this connection that's established, and if we have just gone through the auth flow and the user said no, then here's where you would get back to, is the user has canceled the auth, and we need to handle this appropriately in the application. But in this case, what just happened is that the auth succeeded, or it was a continuation. Actually, in this case, it was a continuation because the user had already given permission. This is in the auth succeeded would be in the case of new permission. New permissions have been granted. So we might want to do something like more fancy at that point of like, congratulations, you've given this thing to whatever. But this is the continuation case is where we great success. We can now use the file system and we get this logged in, and it changes the thing from green to red, from red to green, sorry, and from disconnected. So what we might want to do is actually have a 3-state might want to have actual 3 states here, because what's happening when we refresh the page and it says red D, you're disconnected, it's not actually true. You're not disconnected. We're in the middle of the connection process. And so we probably want to indicate that in the UI that something's actually happening here, and we're going to see if we can get connected. So kind of like the Apple Wi-Fi icon where it animates trying to connect to the Wi-Fi connection and then it connects. You probably want to do something similar for our little plug icon that we'll draw. So anyway, I'm pretty happy with this. This actually works the way we would expect, with one exception. Right now, I cannot disconnect. So right now when I click this, it's actually going to take me to the lobby. Super confused right now. All right, so what just happened is we hit line 88 right then. I would have expected something different than re-asking for permissions. I'm gonna hit yes. It's gonna redirect back. Waiting for that D to turn to a C, turns to a C, click again. Weird. Okay, well, apparently redirect to lobby with permissions always asks for permissions. But what should happen here is it should be a disconnect. So what I am going to do is I'm going to move this code, this event listener code, into our states here. So if you are not authorized, we want to allow you, to redirect to the lobby. Yes. And if you are authorized, then we want to allow you to disconnect. So now in this case, I want to comment that out. Now, the one thing I'll mention is Boris from Fission cautioned me heavily against using wn.leave at all. So this is like a fairly rare case of where the developer actually, or the user wants to deny privileges or permissions to the application to access. We want to break that chain right there. Again, this is not something that'll happen that often, so I'll probably sort of make this less apparent in the UI. But let's go ahead and see if our full loop works right now. So I click here, this should disconnect me. Done, disconnected. If I go to localhost 3000, I am this red D. I am continued. I am not, redirect to the lobby. Let's change that console log statement because that is not true. We could, well, I guess I could move it to here. And then console.log, not logged in. Oh, logged in, log out. We want to change that language. Not connected. And this is disconnected. And this is connected. Log. Just see if that language occurs anywhere else in here. It does not. Okay, cool. So now when I come here, not connected, this D stays the D forever. When I click here, it should now ask for permission. Yep, it does. Let me move this down. Down, boy. Come on now. Ugh, where's the resize handler? Whatever. Yes. This should redirect us back to localhost 3000. We should see this D turn green. See? Boom, it works. Cool. So our full loop works now. I'm going to go ahead and jump over to make a commit. Connect. Disconnect loop works correctly. A little ugly. Could definitely benefit from some work on the icon and the status message, but all in all, I'm fairly pleased with it. Let's jump over here. So we've done this. When first going to mumbler.com, if the user does not have permissions, it should show connect file system. Add a tooltip, start a Mumbler dev blog. Whew! Okay, cool. So we got this done. It does, oh, I know some other things we should do. So when you are disconnected, so let's go ahead and disconnect real quick. You should not be able to click publish. So right now, you're disconnected. I can type some stuff. This is a blog post about a thing. I'm not loving this font weight thing. I think I might change it again. But anyway, click publish. No file system. Yeah, so this publish button should be disabled. Probably want to disable the whole thing, because if I click here and go through the auth flow and come back, pretty sure my post is going to be gone. Yeah, it is. There's this, I mean, I could store this post in IndexedDB, but frankly, if you're logging in and you're not connected to the file system, you need to connect. So we probably do want to make this more aggressive than just like a little red D at the top. So let me go back to the state where I'm not logged in so we can work on styling up the UI. Let's see. Maybe I had some ideas for like, you guys remember modals? Yes, remember modal pop, or no, I guess they were called pop overs, where you would have like edit as HTML, you would have like a div pop over, wrap the whole thing in it, div. All right, now I have this div pop over, and basically element style, background, color, VBA, 255, 255, 4. Ah, absolutely. Okay, cool. My body has padding on it right now. Oh, right. My popover shouldn't be wrapping the whole thing. It should be outside of the whole thing. Um, Let me see. Edit as HTML again. Jump down. Actually, we'll just do this. We'll close it here and then kill that last closing div. Didn't like that. Edit as HTML. How about I forcibly close it there? There we go. Cool. And now we want to set the width to 100%, height 100%. It's not letting me make this thing huge. I'll just make it massive. Let's see. Anyway, I was thinking about making some kind of popover like this. Not that necessary, but that we could then. So instead of doing that, let's take like the minimally invasive thing that we would want to do, which would be disabling these. I think you can just do, if I remember correctly, you can do edit, add attribute, disabled equals true. Or maybe it's something like that. Yep. So we can disable these and disable all of them, and then we can enable them when you come through. So in this case, file system. So I think in this case, we actually want to start with them disabled. That makes it fairly easy. Disabled, true. For the title, for the body, and for the publish button. All right. The hover effect is still real. So we want to disable that hover over when it's disabled. I think there might be like a not. Button hover not disabled. That would be wild if this worked. Input card. I think that actually can work. Not sure if anybody's a CSS expert on here, but all right. So everything is disabled except for the hover style. CSS not disabled. CSS is not disabled. Input not disabled. With the little square brackets, of course. Sure. Not disabled. Let's try that. Oh, enabled. Interesting. Even better. Does not like that style, unfortunately. Let me inspect this and see if it's actually working. Turn on the hover. Input type, submit. I wonder if it's also needed here. Yep, interesting. It does not work. Okay, well, we will. I don't want to handle that using JavaScript. I want to fix it using CSS, but I don't want to do that right now. So right now, what we need to do is once we've connected, enable the user experience or the UX. Sorry. So I think I'm gonna. I don't think there's any other case where we're gonna need to enable it, so I don't have to wrap this in a function. So this will be. We will call this one. Start with the input button, which is post. Other one is a HTML input, no, text area. First one's an input. HTML input element. Is it post title? It is called title input. Good guess. Copilot. Copilot's only aware of one file at a time. It would be really, if it was aware of my whole code base, it would be able to detect these IDs and probably more accurately infer what I'm trying to do, which would be really cool. But Copilot, very cool nonetheless. Body input, I think, is the name of this other one. Oh, this one doesn't have an ID on it. I've been like pretty fast and loose with the IDs. Oh, in fact, text title input is also not an ID. So I'm going to change that to class, change this to a class. I think those query selectors are actually going to return, when I'm using a class, I think it's going to return an entire array. So I think those are actually wrong. Let me be fast and loose with it and just give these things IDs for now. I might have mentioned this last week, but I'm planning on moving this whole application over to a framework, probably going to use Svelte. Got to playing with that last week, and so I'm not spending a lot of time on how to organize this particular file and make it like really clean, because a lot of this stuff is going to be handled by a framework, a component-based framework in the future. All right, so come to the page. I refresh it. I do not have, these things are all grayed out. I hate that that hover state doesn't listen to me, but we'll click here. This should ask for permission. I say yes, come back over here. The UI is still grayed out. Boom! That's cool. Actually, I love the way it like fades up. I don't know if that was as obvious on y'all's screen or not, but it looks really nice. All of it just sort of fades into place, which is kind of what I was going for with that hover effect. Now I should be able to write a new post. Got connect and disconnect working. And we can move on to our last task of the day, which is about continuous SIDs, which will be a fun one. Got like 30 seconds left. Let's go ahead and publish this. Let's see, make sure that everything's still working, and then we can close this PR out too. Got connect and disconnect working. Changed the mental model from log in and log out to connect or disconnect from a file system works pretty well. Whoa, hold on. Pretty well. Almost done, Pomodoro. All right, hit publish. Attempting to save the file. File save. There's the SID ledger. So now I can go to drive.fission.codes. Say yes to give it permission. Jump into public, posts, and there's got connect and disconnect working. Sweet. It is notably missing our posted at thing because I forgot to add it. And so we're probably I'm gonna make this change here in the file system, but something else we need to do to improve our Mumbler is automatically post this so you don't forget it. Because I could have put it up at the top and it would have written it, but all right, that was awesome. Okay, great. So we have finished up 3 Pomodoros now. We are, I'm gonna go ahead and actually before I walk away from my desk, I'm gonna go ahead and add, disable the UA when not connected. That's the last change we just made. We will open a pull request for this when we get back and merge this branch in probably. Then the other thing we need to work on is Mumbler Generator. So this is my Mumbler blog, mumblerjess.netlify.app. It currently requires you to point at a specific SID and tell it what the SID is. And we can talk about that in the context of how this file system works over here, that it is content addressed. There's like a whole, I went through a whole like whiteboarding session where we mapped out like what content addressing means and name addressing and that kind of stuff. And the wrinkle that we need now is how do we have a consistent name that points to a specific SID. And so I have some guidance on how to do that from the Fission team, and we can implement that in Mumbler Generator. And then the last thing we need is for Mumbler Generator to automatically have Mumbler Generator automatically kick off a new build anytime new content is posted. So once we have those 2 things done, this is pretty much like a working blogging application. And it doesn't, yeah, it works now, just requires a little bit more manual intervention than I would like. Okay, 5-minute break. I'll be back to wrap up our last Pomodoro of this working session. Thanks for hanging out so far. Talk to you soon. Start break. Alrighty, we've got another 45 seconds or so left in our last Pomodoro break before we get jumping into our Pomodoro. Yeah, eager to move on with this. So I'm gonna go ahead and start our last Pomodoro. Again, we've been at this for 90 minutes now. We solved a problem around connection and disconnection and like changed the UX paradigm. And so we're gonna start off this Pomodoro by closing this PR that we've just worked on, and then switching over to work on our static site generator and update kind of how we point at content that we generate. Anyway, here we go. Let's see. So jump over to GitHub's and create a PR for this branch that we've been working on. Connect and disconnect. In working on number 2, the login button, I realized that log in and log out were the wrong paradigm for our new passwordless, for key-based auth. In the case of Mumbler, it makes much more sense to think of Mumbler as having permission, or as being connected or disconnected from the user's file system, where it can then write files. This PR updates the UI with connected and disconnected buttons, or status indicators. Yeah, that's what it does. I guess one other thing to note is, would be nice to make the status indicator less prominent and button like. Couple of nice actually let's move our nice to haves over to our doc over here that we're going to carry forward. Add a tooltip, we talked about that one as well. Make the status indicator less prominent and button like, and then the other thing was have a status indicator should have a loading state that's animated when attempting to initialize, or while attempting to initialize web native. That those 3 things would make that really nice. And we'll take a look at maybe doing some of those styling at some point. But for now, it looks like we have a deploy preview from Netlify. Let's see how it looks. Sweet. We are disconnected. Oh, that publish, that hover state's killing me. Disable the hover state on publish when disabled. I'll figure out how to do this with CSS, because the right way to do this is CSS, not JavaScript. All right, but everything's working. You can't actually click on the publish button. I'm clicking on it, nothing's happening. I can't type in these things. So we are disconnected. I'm gonna hit this button to connect, hit yes, and then boom. I love how it fades up. I can't remember exactly where I specified that, like the animations there, but super fun. All right, so now we've got this. Everything looks good. I've already tied publishing a post. That worked. So we didn't break that anyway. One of my like to-dos, actually, we're gonna go ahead and merge this pull request, get this into master. One of my to-dos is actually set up a testing framework for this, that we can write some unit tests around some of the code. But I might wait to do that until after I moved over to Svelte, because most likely Svelte has its own opinionated way to set up a unit test. Okay, so closing Mumbler, let's switch over to the other side of the coin on this particular project. Actually, let me get all those changes here locally. Get remote proven origin. delete that branch. All right, everything's cool here. Let's jump out of the Mumbler directory and into Mumbler Generator. Let's see. I don't think I have any open branches on this. I do a git pull, get remote prune origin. Huh, do have one front matter branch. I thought I closed that out, but let's go look. Oh, we do have an open PR. Add types for front matter. Oh, right. So this was actually me working with Brian from Fission on getting types working appropriately. So we are going to work off of this branch. I had gone through the Mumbler repository before this coding session and just kind of refreshed my memory of what was going on there, but I had not done that for Mumbler Generator. Again, real quick refresher for the way that this thing works. If this is your first time coding along with me on Mumbler, Mumbler is a front-end application that writes markdown files to your file system. Mumbler Generator is we'll abbreviate MG, is a static site generator. Static site generator that reads these markdown files and generates HTML, CSS, and right now just HTML and CSS, doesn't generate any JavaScript, to generate a static blog or static site. So we're working in Mumbler Generator, and what we need to update today is we have we are manually pointing at the SID, or the content ID, for the root of my public, basically my public posts directory has a SID. Now, the SID is like a hash of the content that's in public posts. So every time you change, you add a new post, all that kind of stuff, the SID changes. And that's by design. That's the way that content addressing works. It's like you get a consistent record that points to a snapshot in time of the files and file system, but you need another system that points to SIDs that we can use to consistently point to the newest one. And IPNS or DNS seems to be the way to do this, and I do not fully understand IPNS or DNS yet, so this is going to be a little bit of an exploration, but I have a pretty good idea of the way that we're going to go about this. All right, so right now our Mumbler generator is a pretty simple little TypeScript file that executes and generates HTML and CSS in a super manual way. We'll probably also move this particular system over to something else, but the important part is this right here. The SID for the file containing the markdown files, and we are locked out of editing for the moment because VS Code is being weird. Oh, activating extensions. You see this like activating extensions happening down here? Something ain't right. And they're activated now. Yeah, so I've got some extension here that I'm gonna have to go through and nuke. I do have 30 extensions, my goodness. Probably just gonna go through and like disable a bunch of these. Anyway, so yeah. All right, back over here, figure out how to get a SID from a stable name. So I took some notes on this when I was chatting with Brian, and actually, these notes, I chatted about this in the Discord for web native. So Fission has a Discord, and in that Discord, there's a channel called Web Native FS where you can ask questions about web native. And so let's read through these and see if we can parse this and make sense of it, and then we can hopefully implement it. So what I was saying is, I need the SID of the directory in order to do an ls and get the files from it. Boris says use relative paths from DNS and or IPNS. So we've already noted that you can get the relative path into the browser, and that has a SID in the page. which you can use to get back a JSON listing of the contents. But how can you request a listing for a directory without a SID? Or alternately, how can you request the current SID? And he says grab the SID from the DNS link. But that doesn't really help me. So DNS link contains the current published SID. A file system has a single mutable pointer, e.g. in DNS. To do relative lookups, you use the current root and look for the path in that. You can fetch the latest one first if you don't either have a value or inside that the links are stable and you can walk the paths as normal from the root. How does one walk the paths as normal? Ah, goodness. Okay, so if I grab this DNS link, I'm Jess-Vision or Jess Martin-Vision or something like that. Wait, what? I think I'm Jess Martin-Vision, right? Let's see. If I come here, connect. Yeah, Jess Martin-Vision. All right, let's try this one. Cool. Okay, so this is a public directory of my, or this is a IPFS hosted web interface that allows me to browse my file system. So I can go to public here. I go to userland, posts, userland, and then this is what I want, is this SID. But I need a copy of this SID that is, so this is a stable URL, but I need to be able to pass this SID in to do an LS. And what's not clear to me is how I actually do that. So, or how I grab that SID. So obviously, could grab this SID by doing an HTTP fetch on this page, looking up the div with IPFS hash on it, and grab the contents of that. That seems horrible. It feels like there should be a better way to fetch the most recent SID, but we could just make it work. The other, so let's see. Let's see if there's any Google. How to use IPFS SIDs and fetch IPFS links. Interesting. This is in Filebase? Oh, Filebase, not Firebase. Address, retrieve all the data that's stored. It's better to use Steven says it's better to use the pretty tree /p instead of public. That way you don't need to deal with the userland stuff. Okay. So yeah, Steven, I would be really curious how you would solve this. So if I go to here and then P posts, cool, that's nice, but I need a way to programmatically fetch that SID. And I don't know if there's a library that allows me to do that, or if I'm going to have to scrape this HTML, or is there a JSON version of this that I can query the, yeah, I'm a little confused how to do this. How to use IPFS SIDs and fetch IPFS links. Application gateway. Content stored on IPFS can be accessed by an IPFS gateway. We will probably switch to using an IPFS gateway, by the way. One of the other realizations that I had is the current way we're doing this IPFS LS actually boots an entire IPFS node locally. And we're talking about public files stored on IPFS. So there's really no reason to read an entire, use this method of starting an IPFS node locally and then doing the LS. We could just read from the web gateway. Can use the the URL that Brian posted with API/ls. Really? Okay. So the idea would be that I could use a, I think what Steven's saying is that IPFS.ls can accept both a SID and a URL. So instead, let's just try that. Const URL equals const content URL equals this. Holy smokes, things are going crazy. So is prettier the thing that's like freaking out on me? Yep, I'm stuck in limbo again with oy, oy, oy. Something is not good with my VS Code setup. I'm gonna have to work on that afterwards. Okay, so let's see. Go back over to here. So are you saying that I can use the URL? He says the URL that Brian posted. He's talking about Brian here. Oh, this one. Okay. So this one would be shorter. Jess Martin dash vision dot p. Let's see what that looks like. Posts. There we go. Yeah, Stephen, it does block drop posts out of the chat, or URLs out of the chat, blocks them. But I think I got what you're saying. Sweet. So let's try this. Oh, the IPFS run fission one. This one. Yeah, but the problem with this is, yeah, this is fantastic. But this, oh, but I can say ls. That ls though requires a SID. I guess we could test this with, I really doubt this will work. No way this works. Yeah, thought not. ls requires a SID. And the problem is I don't have a SID. The question is how to get a SID reliably from a stable URL. What I really want is to take this content URL and then get a SID from it that I can then feed into here. How to grab this from the URL? I do not know. Let's see. I'm looking to chat to see if Stevens has any insights here. And again, this might be Steven, I'm wrapping up in 5-6 minutes here, so maybe I'll meet you on the Discord and we can hash this out. Yeah, I feel like no worries. Thanks, Steven. Steven said he's multitasking, he's gonna think about it real quick. I think there's an assumption that we can start from the root file SID, that we can walk the file system starting with the root SID, and I am not sure how to do that. So interesting. Nope, I don't need help. Thank you. Let's see here. To fetch an IPFS link. Yeah. See, this is all about this is all SID stuff. This is not actually DNS and IPNS. Resolve a SID from IPNS. Oh, there we go. Resolve a SID from a relative path IPFS. Yes, that is exactly what I want to do. Let's see, address. Why does it say address IPFS on the web? Yep, we've already talked about dweb addressing. We will probably switch to using an HTTP gateway. That's all fine and good. I love that we have access to the LS via like an HTTP request. We can do that. So we will want to use this LS once I have the right SID here, but I need to resolve a SID from an IPNS or IPFS, or sorry, an IPNS or DNS entry. And that's the part that I'm not sure how to do. SID v1, nope, that's not what I'm looking for. DNS link gateway, the gateway provided. Whoa, SID / path to resource. Okay. So you can append a path. So maybe this is what they were talking about. You can append a path after the SID. Okay, let's see how that might work. I wonder if the web gateways work this way as well. When I was reading, use the current route and look for the path in that. I think that's what they're trying to say is, yes, okay, okay. Immutable route path. All right. Good grief, this stuff is difficult to wrap your head around. Not designed for consumption of normal human beings. All right, I think we're really close here. We got the basic idea, which is we need, we can take a URL. So then how do I grab a, oh, sorry, whoops, not something I wanted to do. We want to get the, now I just need the root SID. This is totally gonna work. Okay, cool. So then, well, let's try this. Okay, so go to here, grab that, and then /p/posts. Nuts. LS does not do what I thought it would do here. Well, we can try it here too. We can see about, comment out that content URL for now. Let's grab the current known top SID of my thing, which is that. And then /p/posts would be that. And then, well, let's run the file, run this thing, see if it works. I think it's npm run default. Yeah. All right, so this is now, this takes a little long to run because it's actually starting an IPFS node locally. Let's see what happens. What would fail? If this failed, we wouldn't see, probably LS would throw an error, or this await loop would not run, and then we would just see in this last console log. Yeah, we basically see nothing. I don't have any like log statements that print out if, well, we'll see all. No, we won't even see all finished. All right, so if this fails, we'll just see it exit, I believe. I do have an exit at the bottom of this, right? Main, yeah, process exit. Okay. Sorry, I know I'm flipping up and down through this file really quickly. Whoa! No way. Did that freaking work? Oh, money. Okay. So it's way easier. Why why don't they just say that? These words, they don't make sense. All right, so I'll come back and update the Discord. Wow, cool. So, so the answer was, well, we still have a problem, one problem, which is we need the root SID. Okay, so I think we're most of the way there now, which is we just need to figure out how to get the root SID, which I know there's an updated DNS link. Every time you change the file system, there's this jessmartin.fission.files.name DNS record that gets updated to point to the newest SID. And so that's the thing we have to figure out how to grab next. Whew! Okay, but all that aside, I'm going to hide all the other things for a second here, bring up our document. Cool. All right. So, thanks for hanging out with me on Coding with Jess. We've been coding for the last 2 hours on Mumbler, made some great improvements to the Mumbler blogging front-end interface where we were able to represent connection and disconnection in the UI, which I think is a meaningful upgrade over this sort of log-in, log-out loop. That felt really good. That PR is merged in and is now published. And then we went over to look at Mumbler Generator to figure out how to look up a specific file underneath the, and to make sure that we're always pointing to the newest copy of the posts directory, which means that we can't use a SID. We can't use a fixed SID for that post directory because it'll change every time we update the content. But what we learned today is that you can take a SID in the file system and then you can append a path, a relative path, on top of that SID, and it'll give you the most recent one. So the last thing we need to figure out how to do is get the DNS link or get the most recent SID of the root file system. I think that should be pretty straightforward. I'm going to go in the Discord right after this and ask, and hopefully someone from Fission can point me to the easy answer. But all in all, it was a good day. I look forward to next week. By the way, next week on Coding with Jess, we're going to try a little bit of a crazy experiment. I'm going to try coding with Jess from nature. So my family is going to be heading to the lake for the week to work from the lake. And so I'm going to kind of try and set up a setup that allows me to actually live stream from basically a park bench or at a camp by the lake. So hopefully that'll be fun and awesome, and I'll have enough actual bandwidth to do that. But yeah, next Wednesday we'll be coming at you from Jordan Lake. So anyway, have a great rest of your day, and yeah, see you in a week.